So you want to drive a car with a manual transmission? Well, I have bad news and good news. The bad news is there are fewer models on the market now than ever before that have a proper 3-pedal manual transmission. The good news is the ones that do offer the feature are easier to learn on than old cars were. Whether you're going to drive a new car or an old car, I commend you, and I'll get you started. Now, the first part of the lesson is I'm going to explain what's going on when you're operating the manual transmission. Now, it isn't absolutely necessary. It could just be about a stick and a pedal. But what I found is people tend to grasp this a little bit faster, learn faster if they understand what is actually going on under the surface. A car with a gas or diesel engine has a transmission with multiple gears for the same reason a bicycle does. A good bicycle, not one of those retro hipster one-speed bikes, please. The idea behind having these gears is you can pedal only so fast, and you'll reach a certain point, and to go faster, you need to shift up. Same thing is true with a car's engine. Let's take a look at the tachometer. The tachometer is a gauge that shows engine speed, and essentially all cars have them, even automatics. You just don't pay attention to it. It'll be marked typically 1, 2, 3, 4, or in some cases 10, 20, 30, but the idea is multiplied by some number that is the revolutions per minute of the engine. And when you hit the gas a bit, you'll see the needle goes up as the engine speed increases. Typically, though, a gas engine will run only up to about 6,000 to 8,000 RPM. It depends on the car, and there are some exceptions. In this car, it's about 7,400 RPM where you see a red line begin. And that red line is called the red line. And the engine is not supposed to run in the red line because it can be damaged. Now, newer cars are less likely to actually incur damage than older ones, but still, that's not where you want to be. So, if you want to go faster and faster in a car, you need to be able to shift to the next gear. Simple, right? Just like a bicycle. Well, there's one area where it's not like a bicycle. On a bicycle, when you start out, you just pedal 1, 2, 3, 4. You can start from a standing stop. An engine, on the other hand, has an idle speed of typically 750 RPM. So it'll run from 750 RPM to, in this case, 7,400. But below 750, nothing. So what's happening is, when you're sitting still, your engine is going 750 RPM, and your transmission and the gears are not moving at all. And you've got to get them going together at the same speed. And that is going to be your job through the use of the clutch pedal. And you are going to suck at it. It's going to be hilarious. To me, you're going to hate it, but I'm laughing just thinking about it. But here, you probably ought to laugh at it too, because you're going to be bad. But if you stick with it and practice, you're going to get better. So let's start with the pedals. You'll see the extra one here, the third, that is the clutch pedal. But it looks like there are 4 pedals in this car, and that is because this one it's technically called the dead pedal, but a better word for that is the footrest. It doesn't really do anything. And footrest is a good name because that is what you're supposed to do, and that is rest your foot there. Do not leave your foot on the clutch pedal. The whole point behind the clutch is use it, and then you get off of it. Put your foot on the dead pedal or the footrest. Here's an important tip before you even get started. When you're operating the clutch pedal, you need your whole leg. You're not putting your heel down, anchoring it like you might with the accelerator pedal and just tilting at the ankle. You need your whole leg. It's a little bit more like a brake pedal in that regard. Also, when you apply the pedal, you always go all the way down to the floor and release all the way out. Always step in all the way, release all the way, and when you're not using the clutch, rest on the dead pedal. Now, before you even head out, if you're just learning how to drive a manual transmission, think ahead and wear sensible shoes. You don't need fancy driving shoes or anything, but here's a tip. Don't wear a big clunky shoe, and don't wear anything with a big heel. And don't judge me. I'm trying to help you, and it's free. Once you learn how to drive, you can wear whatever you want, but for training purposes, be sensible. Now let's get to know the shifter, or the stick, which is how you put the transmission in the different gears. The pattern for the forward gears is pretty much the same in everything, and you'll see it either on top of the knob or somewhere nearby. Typically, the difference between vehicles is really just about how many forward gears it has. This car has 6. Older cars may stop at 4 forward gears. Some cars these days have 7. All just affects how much shifting you'll be doing. Now, one of the most important things you need to know is when it's not in gear, and that is neutral. Neutral position is straight in the middle of all of these, and you'll know it's in neutral when the stick wobbles left and right. Now, I'm going to step on the clutch pedal, even though the engine is off, and you'll see now I'm in first gear, up and to the left. Now notice it doesn't slide left and right. In neutral, there's my wobble. So first, second is below, to the right and up is third, and so on. It's pretty simple stuff. Now, all cars are going to have a reverse gear. That can be in a different location. It used to be up and to the right for a lot of cars. Nowadays, you're starting to see them on the left. The best cars will have a little lockout, like this lift collar, that prevents you from going into reverse unless you really mean it. And when you're practicing going into first, once you get a little bit good at that, you can start doing the same thing with reverse. Okay, you want to find an empty or nearly empty parking lot or road, and it's important that it be flat because you're going to be practicing taking off in first gear and reverse, and the effects of gravity can just complicate things. You need to start the car. When you start a manual transmission, it's always important to make sure it is in neutral. Wiggle that stick. And in newer cars especially, it's necessary, not just good practice, to step on the clutch pedal because that will allow the engine to start. Without stepping on that pedal, you can turn the key all you want. It wouldn't have started with a new car. So when you take off from a stop in a car with a manual transmission, you are essentially trying to coordinate the application of the gas and the release of the clutch pedal or the engagement of the clutch. But what I'm going to do is have you practice first without stepping on the gas at all. Just use the clutch pedal to get a feel for the clutch engagement. Now, when you lift off the pedal, you're engaging the clutch. When you step on, you're disengaging. I'm just going to call it clutch in and clutch out because that's the simplest thing to remember when the time comes to actually do it. So what you'll do is you're going to watch my feet, watch everything I do. You're stepping on the clutch pedal, all right? Stick goes into first. I happen to have the brake on, so I'm going to take the parking brake off. And then you're just going to slowly let that clutch pedal out. See what I'm doing right now? Now, if you have a newer car, this is actually a little easier because the engine control unit, the computer, senses the load and will compensate and give you a little bit more gas. So here you can see my foot's off the pedal. I'm in first gear and I'm moving. Pretty simple stuff. Every car is different. I'm going to do it again for you. Here's how we stop. I've got my foot over the brake, clutch in, and I pull the shifter out of first into neutral and come to a stop. All cars are different. What you're doing is you're getting a feel for where the clutch engages. In some cars it's lower in the pedal travel, like close to the floor, and some it's higher up. All cars are at least a little bit different. So again, clutch in, first gear, let it out slowly. And there you go. You putter around. You can putter around a little bit in first gear if you want to. We'll discuss whether or not we drive in first gear in a bit. So clutch in, stick into neutral, brake, we stop. Now it's actually the same situation for going in reverse, aside from the gear being different. Clutch in, I'm lifting the collar as necessary for this, putting it in reverse, and slowly letting that pedal out. Now I am looking behind me and I have a backup camera, so I don't want it to look like I'm just blindly backing up. There we go. And we're moving. Now you might find that, I'm going to stop now, ready? Remember, clutch in, brake, and take the stick into neutral. Reverse gear tends to be a little bit faster than first because it's the only one you got. So it will feel a little bit different. You're going to want to practice with that too. Now, having gotten a feel for the clutch application, I'm going to show you how we apply the gas and release the clutch at the same time. And it lets you do the same thing you just did, but faster. Here we go. Clutch in, first gear. Now, watch my feet. I'm going to add some gas and release the clutch, and we're moving in first gear. You can hear we're moving faster this time. Okay, same as last time. Clutch in, braking, stick back into neutral. Now, you probably want me to tell you what RPM you should be going when you release the clutch to take off. I can't tell you that. Reason being, first of all cars are different. I want to say it's going to be around 2,000 RPM just to get you going. But first, all cars are different. And second, I don't want you focusing on the tachometer. You're much better off getting a feel for this just by doing it. And I feel the same way about when we get to the point where we're shifting through the higher gears as well. So we did it once. Let's do it again. Ready? Clutch in, into first gear, adding a little gas, letting out the clutch. Okay? Now, let me give you one tip that I think is one of the most useful things that I've found from instructing people on how to drive manual transmissions, and that is there's a notion that this has to be the perfect synchronized balletic application and release, perfectly even, and that's actually not true. What I've found is a lot of people find the process a lot easier while they're learning if they partway through releasing that clutch, if it starts to grab, just hold for a second and then release the clutch the rest of the way. I'm going to try and do that again so you can see what I'm doing, rather than just trying to robotically go in with the gas and out with the clutch. You're applying, you come out a bit with your clutch foot. See my hand here. Wait a second. When it starts to grab, just give it a half second and then release the rest of the way. Here's what I'm doing. Ready? Kind of hard to see, I know, but maybe you understand from what I'm describing. And the thing with that is you got to be a little bit careful about overdoing it. You cannot take forever to get your foot off the clutch pedal. What you're trying to do is go from clutch in to clutch out reasonably quickly, and you don't want to do what's called riding the clutch, where you're kind of controlling the car's speed by how much you're letting the clutch slip. That's bad news, and it wears the clutch really quickly. But on the other hand, this one tip seems to help people an awful lot. Now, you'll notice if you do things real slowly, clutch in, first gear. If you do things slowly, you can give it less gas. Here we go, ready? I'm hardly giving it any gas. It's not much different from when I didn't use the gas at all, right? If you want to take off faster, you're going to have to give it more gas. For example, clutch in, first gear. See that? Much faster. Same thing's true if you're on a hill, and I'm going to address hills in a bit too. If you're on a hill, uphill I should say, you're going to have to give it more gas to get you going. Now, what can go wrong? Well, certainly things can go wrong in this process. One is you can pop the clutch, maybe not give it enough gas, and kill it. And that looks a little like this. Okay, so the car bucks a bit. It's probably not going to hurt the car. So what else could go wrong as you're taking off? Well, you can give it too much gas. You can spin the tires. It'll go something like this. Now, that is definitely cooler than killing it. But don't get addicted, because neighbors don't like it, cops don't like it, and it does put some strain on your car and it'll wear out your tires. To that end, there's something else you should be aware of that could go wrong, and that is you could smell a terrible odor. Chances are that's the smell of your clutch, and that means you are slipping the clutch too much. And if you see smoke, that's definitely a sign that it's time to pull over and cool off. Let the car cool off, you should cool off. All it means is you got to go a little lighter on the gas and a little quicker on the clutch pedal. If you're just revving and slowly letting the clutch out and controlling your speed with the clutch, you're going to get smelly, you're going to get smoke, and you are going to take hundreds or thousands of miles off of the clutch unnecessarily. And once you've gotten good enough at accelerating from a stop, be it in first gear or reverse, you're probably ready to go into the higher gears. And I do recommend you still do this in an abandoned street or a parking lot or the like. It is much easier. The hard part is over. All you got to do is watch my feet. I'm going to have to be steering during this, so excuse me if I don't say everything perfectly. Here we go. Clutch in, first gear. Okay, we're in first. Revs up, clutch in, second gear, clutch out. Clutch in, third gear, clutch out. Excuse my turn. Clutch in, fourth gear, clutch out. Clutch in, fifth gear, clutch out. Clutch in, sixth gear, clutch out. It's pretty simple. Now, what could go wrong in these circumstances? Well, you might accidentally wind up in a higher gear than you want too soon, and you're going to step on the gas pedal and nothing's going to happen. I'll show you. It's like so. Right now I'm in fourth gear, hardly moving, and the car vibrates. There's a sound and a vibration. That means the engine is lugging, and that's not good for it. It's not going to hurt it too badly. It's not like the old days. Cars are much better at protecting themselves than they used to be. But in those circumstances, all it means is you need to be in a lower gear. So let's say I'm moving forward. I'm in third gear, too low. What do? Clutch in, go down to second, clutch out. Everything's fine. It's not that difficult. Now, I'm sure you have an Uncle Tony or something like that always told you never be in top gear below X miles per hour. Well, I'm sorry, Uncle Tony, but I've driven hundreds of cars with manual transmissions, and they're all different. What matters is that you're not lugging the engine. If your car is perfectly happy in its top gear going 40 miles an hour, if you're just cruising, you're fine. Nothing to worry about. Something else that could go wrong is you could rev too high and hit the rev line, and it might look like this. All right, what just happened there was my modern car hit what's called a rev limiter. And that was a pretty hard rev limiter. What it does is it actually stops you from going into what would be a hazardous condition for the engine. Old cars didn't have rev limiters, either hard like this one or soft. Soft meaning the car might just slowly lose speed or might kind of bounce on the rev limiter to get your attention. So again, a newer car, you're not likely to do any damage. Now, once you've been experiencing all this successful upshifting, you're probably going to need to know how to stop, right? And it's actually not that difficult. People, I think, tend to make it more difficult than they need to with some misconceptions about how to slow down and stop in a manual transmission car. By and large, here's what you do. I'm in fourth gear right now. Let's just say I'm in fifth. You use your brake as you normally would. You come slower. So when you get close to the stop, you put the clutch in, put the transmission in neutral, and you're fine. You don't have to downshift through the gears when you come to a stop. Cars are all geared differently. I've been in a couple where I've noticed that the engine starts to falter a bit at relatively high speeds, and I might want to take it out of gear a little bit sooner. But by and large, with all the cars I've driven, even let's say 6th gear, as we are here, you come close to your stop, you're getting closer and closer, clutch in, put it neutral, everything's fine. I've alluded to the complicating effects of gravity, especially when you're learning. I'm going to give you one tip that I think will help, but first, here's what we're talking about. Clutch in, I'm on the brake pedal, I'm going to let off the brake. Now you can see we're moving. Obviously that can make things a little bit more difficult when you're just learning to get going, but I'll show you how it's supposed to go. First gear, see, no problem, because I am a professional. Actually, it's not that I'm a professional. I just have experience, and eventually you'll have experience and you'll be driving through San Francisco like it's no big deal. And to be honest, on a steep hill, I might have a little trouble myself. But here's a great tip that you might find useful even once you do have experience, and that is to use the parking brake, especially the handbrake. And usually manual transmission cars still have a handbrake. Watch what I do with my feet now. Clutch in, first gear. Now what I'm doing is I'm applying the handbrake. I've got my finger on the button here still, so it's mobile. Now I'm letting off of the brake pedal. And then what I do is I give it gas, and I let the clutch out a little bit till I feel it grab, and then I release the parking brake and I'm off. Now this can be really helpful even if you are experienced, as I said, because let's say you park on the street, nose up, uphill, and someone parks behind you and leaves no room, so you have no margin of error to roll back even a little bit. That's the situation where you would, again, clutch in gear, parking brake, let go of the regular brake pedal, and then there you go. It's a good tip. Now, for what it's worth, nowadays, newer cars have added a feature called hill hold, and that's whether they have automatics or manual transmissions, whereby you take your foot off the brake or put the clutch in, put it in first gear, let off the brake, and it will hold the car for you. And fortunately, that has come along right about the time that cars have stopped having an easy-to-use handbrake like this. It would be pretty hard to do what I just demonstrated with a pedal, because you only have 2 feet, or with an electronic parking brake switch. Here's a question you might not think of. Do you need to shift in order? The answer is no. Like right now, I'm in 3rd gear, right? Let's say I give it a lot of gas. I can go right into 5th because the engine speed was high. This is the kind of thing that might happen if you are taking off from a light or something, or on a hill, let's say, in 1st gear, and you give it a lot of revs and you rev up pretty high, you can go from 1st to 3rd. No reason not to. Now here's something you shouldn't do, and that is coast in neutral. I know, Uncle Tony told you you save gas by coasting in neutral by doing this, right? Okay, maybe at some point in history that was true. Probably not very true, probably not worth much, but take a look what's happening right now. I'm slowing down in gear. You know what's happening? My fuel injectors are off. They are not pumping fuel. That's how modern cars work. So what's happening is, if I'm accelerating and then I'm coasting or going down a hill like this, foot off the accelerator, I'm not using gas. What happens if I put it in neutral like Uncle Tony says? Then I am using gas, because gas is needed to keep the engine turning. So there you go, Uncle Tony. You outsmarted yourself. So I'll try and give you some other tips while I'm at it. Here's one. Don't drive in 1st gear. It's not a 100% guideline, but by and large, 1st gear is for getting to 2nd gear, and you do your driving in 2nd gear. Once again, having driven dozens and dozens of manual transmission cars. I've been in a couple where second gear was a little bit too tall, as we call it, for driving in really bad traffic and slow traffic, and I did have to drive in first gear. But unless you have a car like that, there's really no need to be in first unless you're on your way to second. Here's a reminder for you. When you come to a stop, don't do what I'm doing right now. Leave the transmission in gear or in first gear with your foot on the clutch pedal. It's bad practice, but it produces some wear on a bearing called the throwout bearing that is engaged whenever you are standing on the clutch pedal. That is designed to momentarily engage and then disengage. If you sit for long periods, you're just putting tremendous extra wear on that bearing. So don't do it. Now here's a note about downshifting. Here I am going pretty quick in sixth gear, and I want to go down to fifth. I want you to see how easy this is. Clutch in, went to fifth, clutch out, not a whole lot of bucking, all right? Same thing could be true if I were going in sixth gear. Now I'm in sixth. I want you to see, as I make the switch, I'm getting out of this bumpy lane. As I make the switch, it's not bad. Now, if you're getting a little bit better at this, you're more advanced, that's when you learn to blip the throttle, to rev match, it's called. You see how I just gave the gas pedal a bit of a jolt there? Now I'm going back to sixth to do it again for you. What you're doing is you're aligning the revolutions of essentially, to simplify it, the engine and the transmission. For what it's worth, 98% of the wear on your clutch happens when you're going from a stop in first gear or in reverse. So it's not critical that you rev match, but once you get a little bit more practice, you might find that you're able to do it and keep your shifts, your downshifts smoother, like so. Watch again. Nice and smooth. Eventually, you're going to have to park your manual transmission car, and it can be a little bit different from an automatic because there is no park setting for the transmission. So I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm in neutral. I took my foot off the clutch, right? You're going to rely on the parking brake, whether it's a handle, a pedal, or an electric switch, which is the new thing. But people tend to also want to leave the transmission in gear, especially if you live someplace hilly, because, let's face it, parking brakes aren't perfect. They're not infallible, and especially as the car ages. So what do? Well, there are a couple ways you can do it. You can put the clutch in, put the car in gear, let's say first, and then turn the engine off, let the clutch out, and you're good. You could also, presumably, let's just do it for the sake of argument, you're in neutral, clutch out, turn the car off, then push the clutch pedal, put it in gear, release the clutch pedal, and then you have the added security of having the engine's drivetrain keep the car from moving. Just to be extra careful, what I'll do, if I'm parking, say, nose into a space, I will put it in reverse when I park. So if I come back and, let's say, I absent-mindedly start the car and pop the clutch and not realize it's in gear, at least I'm going backward and not into the wall in front of me. And likewise, if I back into a space or back up into my garage, I'll park it in first gear for the opposite reason. Well, I think that's about all the help I can give you beginners. Wasn't this car black when we started? It's okay. We used two cars for this shoot. One was a black Subaru BRZ. This one is a Toyota 86. They're essentially twins. So it all worked out fine. I'm impressed if you noticed, by the way. What was I saying? Yes, I think I've done what I can for you. I hope you've absorbed what I've shown you and that you have the confidence now to try driving a car with a stick shift. There's no question you're not going to be good at it at first. You're probably going to kill the engine a few times. You're probably not going to hurt the car unless it's really old and frail. You might hurt your ego a little bit, but give it time. One thing you need to recognize is driving a car with a manual transmission proficiently is kind of like typing without looking at the keys. You aren't really good at it until you aren't thinking that hard about it. Just one day you'll realize you're doing it second nature, subconsciously, and that's when you'll be good at it. Whoever is lending you a car to let you try to learn to drive a stick, you might want to buy them dinner, because chances are you're going to take a few miles off their clutch. But it's all part of the learning process. Good luck.